what we were thinking at that time was that we wanted not a lot of central government power. So we wanted to get away from what the king was doing in England, and that's why we were here in America, to get away from like all that rule. But so they put a lot of power within the individual states. And what we were starting to discover after that was that is going to be super confusing, and there's just too many cooks in the kitchen in that situation. So I think we're going to be moving more toward like unionization, which is just kind of coming together and maybe trying to become one with the ideas of America and the country. So that's what we're going to talk about with this lesson.
Lesson 2. Creating the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson and others used a numbered code to write secret letters during the Constitutional Convention. In 1776, a group of American patriots representing the different states signed the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. In May 1787, many of the same representatives or delegates returned to that city. This time, their goal was to form a stronger government. Some came to strengthen the Articles of Confederation. Others came to craft a completely new constitution or written plan for government for the young nation. The Constitutional Convention. The meeting, known as the Constitutional Convention, included people who had steered the young nation toward independence. Benjamin Franklin was 81 by that time, the oldest person to take part. He suffered from poor health, but was present for most of the convention. Franklin supported a stronger national government. James Madison, also a member of the Continental Congress, firmly believed in a strong national government. During the convention, he took detailed notes that historians still consult today. Patrick Henry, who had argued fiercely for independence, refused to attend the convention. He defended the Articles of Confederation and opposed taking power from the states. George Washington, who had led the nation to victory during the Revolutionary War, also attended. Outspoken about the need for a new form of government, Washington was elected president of the convention. I will know how the Constitution was created and the plan for government the Constitution describes. Vocabulary: delegate, constitution, compromise, preamble, separation of powers, checks and balances, veto. Use the above key to decode the message. Each number equals a letter, and slashes show where new words begin. Alexander Hamilton had worked closely with George Washington during the Revolution. Later, he became a member of Congress and a lawyer. Hamilton agreed that the central government created by the Articles of Confederation was too weak. 1. Read the statements from each patriot. Write C next to the quote if the person supported a strong central government and new constitution, or A if the person supported the Articles of Confederation. Ideas for debate. The Constitutional Convention began on May 25, 1787. Its original goal was to improve the Articles of Confederation, but some delegates clearly had other plans. Edmund Randolph, from Virginia, argued for a whole new form of government. He presented the Virginia Plan at the start of the convention. It called for an executive branch to carry out laws and a judicial branch to decide their meaning. Congress, the legislative branch, had a great deal of power in this plan. It would decide who served in the other two branches and would be made up of representatives from each state. States with larger populations would have more representatives in Congress. Therefore, they'd have more power in the government. This plan was seen as a good starting point, except for one major point. Delegates from the smaller states did not like the idea of having less power than those in the larger states. William Paterson of New Jersey one of the smaller states, proposed a new plan, the New Jersey Plan. It was very similar to the Virginia Plan, except that it called for each state to have the same number of representatives. This would give all states equal power, no matter their size. 2. Delegates debated the Virginia and New Jersey plans. Fill in the parts of the two plans that are different. The Great Compromise. The delegates could not agree on a new plan for government. Roger Sherman, from Connecticut, was one of the delegates with a new idea. He proposed that Congress be made up of two parts, or houses. In one house, the Senate. Each state would have the same number of representatives. In the other, the House of Representatives, the number of representatives from each state would be in proportion to the state's population. Thus, each state would have equal power in the Senate. However, larger states would have more power in the House of Representatives. The delegates debated for a month before agreeing to what became known as the Great Compromise. A compromise takes place when people on both sides of an issue give up something to reach an agreement. Another difficult issue faced the convention. Southern states wanted their population counts to include the large numbers of enslaved people living in the South. This would increase their representation in the House of Representatives. However, they did not want enslaved people to be counted when it came to being taxed. Northern states, which had fewer enslaved workers, objected. The issue was settled with the 3/5 compromise. States would count their enslaved people both for representation and for taxes, but only 3 of every 5 enslaved people would be counted. A new plan for government. Delegates worked through the summer of 1787, writing the new plan for government. The preamble, or introduction, expressed the main goals of the new Constitution. The Constitution set up a government with 3 branches. In contrast, the Articles of Confederation had only one branch of government. Under the new U.S. Constitution, the legislative branch would make the laws. It would be called Congress. The executive branch, led by the President, would put the laws into effect and make sure they were obeyed. The judicial branch would interpret the laws and make sure they followed the Constitution. This separation of powers meant that each branch of government would balance the power of the others. The Constitution also set up a system of majority rule. This means that decisions are made by a majority, or more than half of the people voting. For example, the majority of lawmakers must agree on a law before passing it. At the same time, the government would protect minority rights, or the rights of smaller populations of people. The framers or authors of the Constitution wished to limit the power of government in other ways. They set up a system of checks and balances. In other words, each branch had ways of limiting the powers of the other branches. For example, Congress would pass laws, but the President would have to sign a law to make it official. In this way, no branch of the government could acquire too much power. 3. Read the words of the preamble. Circle the first 3 words on the 1787 version. Write why you think these words are important. Limiting government. The President can limit the power of Congress with a veto or a refusal to sign a law. However, if 2/3 of Congress wants a law, Congress can reject the veto. This is Congress's check on the power of the President. The judicial branch can check the power of both Congress and the President. If the courts decide that the other branches are doing something against the Constitution, they can stop those actions. The President can check the power of the courts by choosing the justices and judges who serve in federal courts. Congress can check the power of the court by refusing to approve the choices of the President. 4. Fill in the chart with the missing checks and balances between the branches of government. Powers of government. As the delegates debated the Constitution, they asked questions. Would the new government take away all the power of the states? Would it become the kind of government from which they had just freed themselves? Would the president gain too much power and become a kind of king? To avoid these dangers, the Constitution set up a federal system of government. The Articles of Confederation had given most of the power to the states. In a federal system, powers are divided between the national and state governments. For example, the Constitution explains that only the national government can print money or make laws about trade with foreign nations. At the same time, the Constitution lists many reserved powers or powers that belong to the states. The states have authority to manage elections and issue licenses. Some powers, such as passing tax laws, are shared between the state and national governments. 5. Write one more power of government in each part of the diagram. For some delegates, the new Constitution was not enough. Many believe firmly that the Constitution should include a list of the rights citizens have to protect their freedom. Others felt that the wording of the preamble was enough. This debate would lead to one of the most important elements of the Constitution. 6. This picture shows a federal worker at the U.S. Bureau of Printing and Engraving. Write the power of government that is shown here. 7. Compare and contrast. Compare and contrast the main differences between the Articles of Confederation and the United States Constitution. Include in your answer how powers are shared and branches are divided under each plan for government.
Okay, so that's going to be our question for today. Again, it says compare and contrast the main differences between the Articles of Confederation and the United States Constitution. Include in your answer how powers are shared and branches are divided under each plan for government. So if you need to watch this video again or rewind the video at some part, you can definitely do that. And then answer your question in the assignment for Chapter 6, Lesson 2.